Just hang out with us at our meeting. Want to go to the meeting?
We are live.
Wonderful. We are going to call, we're going to call this meeting of the Quality of Life Committee meeting to order. It's Wednesday, July 23rd at 5:01 p.m. May I please have a roll call?
Counselor Castro,
Presente.
Counselor Chavez,
Here.
Counselor Garcia,
Present.
Counselor Faulkner.
Here.
Madam Chair,
I am here.
you have a quorum.
Wonderful. Moving on to approval of the agenda. Any changes from staff or the committee? And if not, can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Can I please get a roll call as we are hybrid today?
Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner.
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
motion passes.
Wonderful. Okay, approval of the consent agenda. If I recall correctly, items H and I were pulled off. Anything else at this time? And if not, can I get a motion to approve as amended?
Approve as amended.
Second.
Oh, Marcel?
I'm sorry, I got an email from Marcy.
Oh.
It's still scanning. So there's going to be an amendment
Okay.
added to item H.
Item H. Okay, so it's on its way. Wonderful.
And I will email it as soon
Perfect.
as it stops scanning.
Perfect. So did we get a motion and a second to approve as amended? Bye, Hula. See you later. Sorry, there's a dog. I'm distracted. Okay. Motion and a second. May I please have a roll call to approve consent as amended?
Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner.
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
motion passes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Moving along to item H. So this is consideration of resolution number 2025 to be numbered later, sponsored by Counselor Pilar Faulkner, Counselor Lee Garcia, and Counselor Amanda Chavez. It's a resolution proposing a ballot question to be submitted to the City of Santa Fe voters during the November 4th, 2025 regular local election regarding amending the city's charter to require governing body consent before a mayor can remove a city manager, city attorney, or city clerk. Myself and Counselor Castro pulled this item. We have two of the sponsors here, so I will turn it over to the sponsors and then we can move to Counselor Castro and the rest of the committee.
Can we start with Counselor Chavez?
Absolutely. Counselor Chavez, floor is yours, and I like your earrings.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm settling in. I just walked into my hotel room, so getting settled in. So I want to just open up by saying that, and I stressed this on Monday, I think that why this is important, this is just my opinion, why this is important to me is because of what I heard from constituents recently. And I know that when it was brought to me, it was kind of aligned when I had some of that feedback and just this discussion I've been having with constituents about the difference between leadership and politics, and how if we had more leadership influence here in the city, that our city would run and look a little bit differently. It would have a different impact on employees. It would have positive impacts in a lot of different ways. And part of the conversation with my constituents was this idea that we have these key leadership roles that are highly influenced by one position, one position has high impact on it, and how could they not be ran politically? And this is what I'm saying the constituents said, and I listened, but I could see why the structure would lead them to believe that, and I think that this is an opportunity to kind of balance that power and to transition our focus from politics to leadership. And I know we're all in political roles, but I think what we need everywhere right now is more leadership than anything else. And I think this is a start. I do think there's a lot more changes that need to come. I think our charter needs to be looked at and for a lot of other different reasons to kind of address the same issue. But I think that this is a good start.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Faulkner?
So I'd like to echo the comments of Counselor Chavez. This is about trying to produce leaders and not politicians. And it's also, this may not be the best answer, but it is an answer for the short term. And I think Counselor Cassett and I have been talking a lot about doing a charter review about the relationship between the council and the strong mayor. I say this at every hearing, we contemplated a strong mayor, but we didn't contemplate how a council and would balance that power. And that's one of the things that makes America great again. The reality is for our city, for our county, for our state, for our country to be able to function appropriately, checks and balances is the key. And I'm not saying this is the long-term fix for some things. I'm saying it's a short-term fix until we have the time to get vested into a longer-term fix. And so anytime there's a municipal election, we have the opportunity to address the charter. Again, I'm not saying this is the silver bullet answer, but I am saying that between now and 2 years from now, this gives us some guardrails. It gives us a balance of power. And I know that when we address the charter in total, we will probably come up with a better answer. But for right now, this just gives us a little bit more as a council to have guardrails up and to be in a position where the power of these three positions, the city clerk, the city attorney, and the city manager, we have the opportunity to balance the scales a little bit until we can figure out what the actual great answer is.
Wonderful. Thank you. Counselor Castro, I will pass to you.
Thank you so much. Chair, thank you to the sponsors for bringing up a really important conversation around power and leadership and how we best serve our community. I do think it's really important just to peg that there is a high tension in our community right now, in particular around what's happening at the federal level. So we should be a little bit careful with the terminology that we're using from the dais. In particular, I think that it's really important that we talk about the balance of power because I too am very concerned that there is an imbalance between the governing body and the mayor. In particular, the mayor's office sits on this governing body and has a full vote and is also able to set budgets and direct staff in a way that we're not. So one of the other ways that we could potentially deal with some of these issues and has been recommended by the Charter Review Commission is to not allow for the mayor to have a vote on the governing body. And there is a piece of legislation that will be coming before us very soon that would suggest that. So it is just a different avenue and different way of reaching this kind of accountability. I do in particular think it's interesting that we are trying to, in this particular resolution, direct staff that doesn't always necessarily have longevity when, for example, we have an election year or there's a transition in leadership. I do have some concerns on what that means just in the practical sense of somebody staying on after their quote unquote boss has stated that they don't want to work with them. We recently have had positions, deputy city managers, for example, that have had contentious appointments. And I don't think that is the best situation for our community when a boss and an employee are having tensions or at odds. That being said, I have also some concerns with the numbers that are specific in these the questions on the charter amendments, mostly because if we were to change the number of folks that sit on the governing body, those would have to be amended and updated and have to go before the voters again. So if there's any suggestions that I could make in terms of making this easier for me to vote for, it would be that we change to a simple majority as opposed to specific numbers. And I cede the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Counselor Faulkner.
So one thing to consider is that we are not going to contemplate the issue of how many people serve on the council. We can't do that right now. We will do that. If we do that, we will be doing it in 2 years. But for right now, we can contemplate what we're working with right now, which is 8 counselors and a mayor. And there's no time between now and the upcoming election in November to contemplate how many members sit on the city council. But at least this initiative can temporarily give the council some checks and balances with the strong mayor position. And I do think one thing that's fascinating to me is that we feel like if we make a decision that has the law behind it, like if we pass a charter amendment or an ordinance, that there's this assumption that it's permanent and can never change. The reality is the law is a tool that we use as legislators to be agile and flexible to meet the needs of our community. To try to figure out how many members of the council we should have is not something we will answer between now and November. I was very gung ho to approach how we do the budgetary process. And then I realized it's too big between now and November. But these two pieces of legislation create continuity. They give a little stopgap and a little bit of guardrails until we figure out the rest of it. And to me, I don't feel like we should pause on things that could give us some kind of checks and balances because we're waiting for this bigger thing. I am 100% in with Councilor Castro and Councilor Cassett that we have to look at this relationship in a much deeper way and a broader way. That is not something we can do between now and November. What we're proposing is something we can do between now and November. And it's not the silver bullet, but it is it's a small space where we can have some checks and balances until we figure out what the silver bullet is. And my belief is it's going to take some time to figure that out. It's going to take a lot of conversations. We don't have the time to do this between now and November. This is just a very, again, I'm going to repeat this over and over again, a very small measure that puts something in place until we can figure out what the real answer is, what the best answer is. And I know that there are so many smart people on the council. Everyone invested in this conversation is super smart and has the best intentions in play. And so I feel like let's just do this small thing and then we'll contemplate the bigger thing when we have the time that's appropriate to contemplate it.
Counselor Travis?
Thank you. So I wanted to just address, yeah, I want to first appreciate Councilor Faulkner and kind of, and I don't want to say separating the different things that need to be addressed because I think we're just chipping away at like a larger problem that we're just trying to make better, right? Kind of remodel what is currently in place. However, I did just want to be clear that when we're talking about members, number of members, that's a larger charter issue. There would be a lot of changes that would need to be addressed. So with this in place, if it would be in place, what would happen if we were going to reconsider the number of representatives on governing body? There's multiple areas within our charter that would be revised because of that decision, which means this would also be as well. Because there's a lot there. I do think that we often choose inaction, like we choose not to act. And I think it really frustrates a lot of our constituents because it's like, well, what if, and we also need to do this. And yeah, we need to do a lot. But if there's things that we can act on now, I think it's our responsibility to do so. And I think that this is one of them. I think it's also something that we continue to consider and we are willing to make change and make better as we should do with any decision that we make. But I have to agree with Councilor Faulkner. I think we could find a lot of reasons why not to act on a lot of things. But I think the Santa Fe community is kind of frustrated with the fact that that seems to be something that occurs. And we have an opportunity to start here and to continue doing the work so that we continue to evolve into something better.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to clear some things up for the record. We don't have to wait 2 years to amend the charter. We can hold a special election, or we can have it in conjunction with any regular scheduled election that's taking place. With the only parameters we have to work with is to work with the county clerk to get the question before her to ensure that it's on the ballot so that for example, the timetable we're working with now is it mid-August, Marcy, I believe, for this current cycle? There's, what is August?
Chair Cassett and counselors, the deadline to get ballot measures to the county clerk is August the 26th.
Okay, so that's the deadline ultimately we have to work against. And so we can always amend the charter whenever we want. Now for us to, I'm glad we're having this conversation because, 2 years ago, after the Charter Commission convened and made their recommendations, there wasn't much appetite for moving forward on their recommendations. I put Marcy to work, and thank you, Marcy, back then for, I believe it was something like 8 proposals we put forward based off of the recommendations. And unfortunately, only 3 of those passed. And I think if we're going to begin to relook at amending our charter, the first thing we need to look at is the Charter Commission's recommendations. That they did their work, even though it was in a short tenure. They did provide some good recommendations. It's not only on the topics of the separation of powers, but it's on the topics of budget. I mean, we thankfully got their recommendations around convening and providing them resources passed. That's now reflected in the charter, as well as lowering the threshold for referendum and initiative. But the separation of powers, there wasn't an appetite back then. And I'm glad to hear that there is now. Now, as we move forward with looking at whether it's these 2 measures or any 2 measures that are coming up, we always got to look at it from the lens of how does it potentially impact any broader changes that might be kind of more along the lines of what the public is asking. And I think that's where we want to be cautious and careful, just because it is a big lift to amend the charter. And what I mean by that is not only does it have to pass this governing body, but it has to pass the voters. And so those are 2 huge hurdles when that must be undertook when you're amending the charter. And not only when you're trying to amend it to add something and reflect change, but when you're trying to potentially undo change. And so we always want, I just want to caution us that when we're looking at it, it's not as easy to change as we might think it is. Now, in regards to the legislation in front of us, I did the amendment that I had proposed with Councillor Faulkner is in the packet. For those that might not have a copy of it, I'm going to just read what the amendment does. And so in the caption, it adds to the end of the caption the language, except during the first 180 days of a mayor's term. And then it goes on to include in page 2, line 21, have the authority to remove without governing body consent the city manager, city attorney, and city clerk during the first 180 days of a term. After 180 days of a term, have the authority to remove the city manager, city attorney, and city clerk. And then it later on, page 4, it adds some similar language, except during the first 180 days of a mayor's term. A couple lines reiterates that a little later during the question. And then it reiterates that the mayor would have the authority to remove without governing body consent the city manager, city attorney, city clerk during the first 180 days of a term. And so the intention around this is that, whenever an incoming administration wants to begin to implement their agenda, because we have to remember that a mayor is elected based off of a particular platform or agenda that they presented to the public, and the public stands behind that and then elects that individual. So that individual whom is elected should have the right to select the appropriate folks that are going to help them with the implementation of the agenda that the mayor was elected to implement. Again, I'll state for the record, as I mentioned in a previous meeting, that this has nothing to do with me as a current mayoral candidate. This has everything to do with good governance. There wants to ensure that especially since we're talking about separation of powers, we want to ensure that the executive has those duly righted powers and authorities still granted to them. Doesn't necessarily dip into the legislative side. So I think that's where I'm coming from with this amendment. I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have regarding the amendment. So if there's no questions, I'm happy to make a motion to adopt Amendment A.
Well, we hold on, we haven't, we will get to our Russian dolls of motions in a bit. Because we don't have a main motion on the floor, but
Okay.
I'll let you know when it's time. Any other questions or comments from the committee? And thank you, Counselor Lee Garcia, for joining us. I appreciate it. Counselor Castro?
Yeah, just a quick comment that amendment that I'm proposing will be coming through quickly. And because it would remove the voting power from the mayor, it would potentially be affecting majorities, supermajorities, and simple majorities. I just want to put that up there.
Thank you. I've gone back and forth on both of these, the last few weeks, and even all day today. It's been a really interesting journey. A couple questions, because the caption currently says that, to require governing body consent before a mayor. So that means that the governing body, including the mayor, because the mayor sits on our governing body, does get to vote on this. So we are talking about a 5-4 vote potentially, or that's the breakdown, at least 5 members of the governing body voting. That's a little different than what the caption of the legislation and the what's on our agenda is a little bit different because it says requiring council approval for termination. So that, I think that that's something that we really need to make sure that we're differentiating. We're not just talking about the city council, we're talking about the governing body as a whole. Am I understanding that correctly? That with this proposal, essentially a 5 vote, regardless, I mean, obviously in this situation, potentially the mayor is wanting to get rid of this individual, so, or one of these, but am I understanding that correctly? Mayor would have a vote here.
So I don't think that was the intention. I think it's like what I would call a catch and clean up, which is like we use terms and how they're defined is different to each person, right, on the council. I would think that we would want it to be the council and not the governing body.
So you would essentially need a majority of the council. So you would need 5 members of the council, which essentially is kind of a super majority of the council. Well, we can get into those numbers later. So I think that is, that needs to be shifted, whatever the way it's going to be. That wasn't clear based on what the actual resolution states. So if that was the intention, I just want to make that very clear that at this point with this one, council's voting, mayor would not have a vote on this one.
That was the intent.
Okay.
So I think that's an amendment we can put forward.
Okay.
Finance.
Okay. As it's being passed today, though, it is a governing body vote because that is what it states. So with whatever's being voted on today, that would be a governing body. And I believe that would then have to be amended. Because
Although I think that'd be an easy amendment that we could do on the fly because it just needs to be written.
it does change the caption. So I am curious about noticing at this point in time. So when you look at just on the portal, it says ballot question requiring council approval for termination. When you look at the actual resolution, a resolution proposing ballot question to be submitted, blah, 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 to require governing body consent before a mayor can remove a city manager.
So I think if we did this quick catch and clean up amendment, it's changing, like the caption doesn't change.
It changes the caption, absolutely, of the resolution. So that
You said the caption said it doesn't.
the caption so there's a discrepancy between what is on Civic Clerk and what the resolution actually says. So that would have to be determined. Marcy, please, to you.
Chair Cassett, counselors, if I could just ask a clarifying question. I think that the confusion is actually the title of the documents in your packet. The title of the document really does say council because there was an old version of this that was playing with the idea of it being council consent, just like you guys are discussing right now. And that was an oversight on our part. We should have edited the title of those documents. But where governing body actually came from was the desire for parity and parallel nature between the appointment and the removal. And so you'll see that current charter right now specifies that it's governing body consent. And so that's why we changed it from council to governing body in the proposed amendment that you see. And just to be really clear, the caption of the resolution, like the thing that we all think of as like the all capitalized title, also says governing body, and so does the thing that is noticed on the agenda item. So if we were to do an on-the-fly amendment, it would actually change that caption.
Well, and it looks like the amendment that would pass today would also change said caption. So what does that do for noticing and the voting schedule?
Thank you for asking that question, Councilor Cassett. I had the same question for Erin. She said that we would just change the caption as it is shown on the agenda, but that she didn't think that we needed to renotice it at
Because
this
it's a
time.
resolution versus an ordinance?
Correct.
Okay.
I think so, because it doesn't rise quite to that same level that
Okay.
it would with a bill. So that's.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Oh, did you have a question? Yes. Councilor Fulton.
So is there a problem with the governing body doing it? If it includes the mayor, then that actually is more checks and balances in the sense that for the governing body to get rid of a city manager, city clerk, or city attorney, something must really be going on if it takes the governing body to decide that.
Well, that sounds like that's the next one that we're discussing. So this one right now is to prevent, this is that they have to consent to getting rid of them. And so essentially they could stop a firing of a city.
No, but
manager,
on,
city attorney.
on both of these, because we tried to do this in one piece of legislation
Yeah.
and they're two different things, right? And so, but we're still contemplating the same thing is like, what does it take to, like, what does it take to keep or get rid of, or I don't want to say get rid of, to terminate any of these positions? There is like in listening to the conversation that we're having tonight, there is a part of me that's kind of like maybe governing body is the right way to go.
Right. Well, I think at the moment, that's where we are with it. It's being voted on as a governing body. Now, that being said, I came down split on these two proposals, and this one I'm actually not in favor of. As Councilor Garcia did point out, there is a mandate, you know, the community elects the mayor. We do have a mayor that does represent the entire community. We have an election process. I do think this is a really interesting conversation around how do we depoliticize some of these positions or depoliticize these positions as a whole. How do we ensure that we are looking at individuals who are being appointed and retained on competence as opposed to political leanings? However, I also fall on the line of, even if you hate a mayor, I mean, even if you don't like them, you don't like what they're doing, you still, if you care about the city, you want them to succeed. And so they do need a team that they can work with. And so if they're saying, I can't work with the city manager, I can't work with the city attorney, I can't work with the city clerk, I do not think that it makes for a very effective government structure for them to be able to, for them to be, you know, forced to continue working with them. And I would imagine that anybody put in that position would then be in the situation where they want to potentially resign. And what that actually does to severance packages, I actually don't know what that looks like within HR. But so that's why I have a really hard time with this one. But it is because of the other factors that are coming in. One, the governing body does have to consent. So a mayor can go ahead and say, hey, I'm not into the city manager, I'm getting rid of them. But then when they're appointing another one, the governing body does need that consent. And so there is another check there. And it is why I'm coming down on the other side for it, which we'll get to, around a governing body being able to fire any of these three positions, terminate any of these three positions without mayor approval, without mayor voting in favor of that. Although I have some questions on numbers there as well. And I've struggled with this one because I do think this balance of powers is an issue. We've had this conversation and what are the different mechanisms? And as Councilor Faulkner has already alluded to, we are working on putting forward a resolution that will very specifically look at the balance of powers. My memory of the last charter review was not that there was not an appetite for looking at the balance of powers, because I know that was something when I spoke to the charter review committee and when we looked at that list, there was a whole conversation of like, hey, this balance of powers thing is a little messy. But in talking to the charter, it was like, this is a really big topic and you did not give us enough time and resources to really tackle this one. So I know that was something I was very interested in, that a lot of people were very interested in. And I think that pulling together a charter review that is really focused on this issue, because it does, impact a lot of the government, is important. So at this time, I am not in favor of this. I do want to make sure that any mayoral candidate, I want them to have a functioning government. There's really big policy issues that we will get into discussion with the council and the mayor, that we can have those debates, we can put forward those legislation. But I think when it comes to the everyday functioning of the city of Santa Fe, and whether permits are being, permitted, whether granted, whether the parks are getting mowed, all these different components, that it is really important to have an executive who is able to work effectively with their executive team. This does bring up the question that I know, Councilor Faulkner, you and I have spoken to, and I don't know if there's anybody who can really answer. This might be a question for the city attorney around our relationship to these three positions. So it is very interesting. We can direct the city manager. I am unaware, I don't believe we can, I don't think anybody can really direct the city attorney to do something, because that is not their role. Their role is to provide legal counsel or legal opinion. I think determining what the roles are of these three positions is actually really crucial and something that needs to happen. But same with the city clerk. I don't recall any opportunity where we've been able to direct them, which is again, this is a really interesting conversation, because the city manager also can't direct them. So when we start to look at this structure, we have some challenges here. But ultimately, the city manager, we have a very specific relationship with. Right now, we do have the power to terminate a city manager with a supermajority. And that makes a lot of sense to me, because the city manager is the one, member of staff that we do have the ability to direct, that we do have this interesting, where they do report to us. They do essentially have 9 bosses, even if, the mayor is the one who should be driving kind of the policy goals. Again, really big conversations around the complexity of our city government. Marcy, did you have something?
Councilor Cassett, I am also with you. I think this ultimately should be a city attorney question, but I just thought I would hop in here and just point out that in the mayoral powers in the charter, it explicitly states that they have supervisory, they're the supervisors of the city clerk, the city attorney, and the city manager. And so I would imagine that I'm imagining right now,
Right.
not making an actual opinion, but I would imagine it might be complicated if you had a city council giving direct supervisory type instructions to those three when their boss is actually the mayor.
Right. And where this starts to get really fun and complicated is you have constituent services who sits under the city clerk, who we don't have power over the city clerk, but do the staff of constituent services, even though they sit under the city clerk, do they actually report to the city manager? I've heard it both ways. We have some things to do. We have some really big questions that we need to be looking at. But ultimately where I came down with this one is that you want the executive to succeed because it's what's best for the city. We have our opportunities to disagree on policy. When we were having the budget conversation, we had a lot of conversations around how do we start to work that direction. Contemplating things like a strategic plan for the city that is approved by the entire governing body, so that there is this continuity and consensus on the main priorities of the city. I think that this is really challenging. I could have argued this one either way, but at the moment, that is where I'm coming down with this specific resolution. And
Sure.
yeah, absolutely.
I think the amendment that Counselor Michael Garcia and I have put forward answers your question about like a new administration wanting to have the bandwidth to pick their team. I do think I've been told by the city attorney that when it comes to legislation, the city attorney works for us. Right? So these positions do work for the council and the mayor. There's nothing in this legislation that gives us the power to direct any of these positions. And I think the amendment that Councilor Michael Garcia and I are offering allows the space for an incoming mayor to pick a team that they can work with.
Yeah, but that actually, so that, and a bit of a discussion there, in terms of is 6 months really the right amount of time? What if they put somebody in and in 2 months, the council's like, oh my God, get rid of this person. Or the mayor wants to jump ship, whatever the case may be. But what I'm really thinking about is, it might be 2 or 3 years. And then, there's something that the, city manager is, or whoever it is that, it's not working well with the mayor. And they want to remove them and replace them with somebody else. And then you have the council coming in and saving this position and potentially having another 2-3 years of a term that is really dysfunctional. So I do understand, the idea of picking their team. And I do think that, that piece is important. Although, again, I can argue 10 different ways with this. I know that when I was talking with City Manager Scott, he was saying he's been in some or some cities where the new mayor is actually not allowed to make fires for 6 months because the whole idea is that you want continuity. And again, these shouldn't be political appointees. These should really be about, is somebody, qualified for the job? Are they doing a good job at their job? Not are they going to be serving a particular political intent? So really good questions to explore. But I still, for me, I want a mayor to succeed, even if I am not a fan of said mayor. I want the city to function. And I really think that it is important that they have a team that they're able to work with. Now, when we get to the next one, I will also say that if a mayor really likes and they're an incompetent one of these three, I think that the council should be able to remove them. So we'll get to that one. But for this one, I think it's about a balance of powers and good governance. And I think in good governance, you want an executive who can work with their team. And we do have some other places along the way where we can make sure that is being watched, that it's a functional place.
So I would offer that we can already fire the city manager.
Correct. Which is why the next one, I'm like, sure, that sounds great. Let's do the next one.
But and the city manager directs everyone else. So then if, we're not asking for something beyond the pale.
Well, but this one would also save a city manager. So if a mayor is trying to fire a city manager, the council can come in and be like, no, you can't do that. And then forcing a mayor and a city manager who don't work well together to continue to work well together. That's where my concern lies. Now, the next one, we do contemplate firing, and it sounds like in that one that there is the opportunity for, which is why, I came down split on these. And in the next one, it does, contemplate the removal of one of these three positions, regardless of whether or not the mayor is in favor of that removal as well.
So this is where I struggle as a counselor in the same ways you do, is that I look at it and I'm like, well, so we can do it with the city manager, but we can't do it with the city attorney and we can't do it with the city clerk. That's the part where like my brain in policy is like, well, there needs to be continuity. If we have appointment power, or not appointment power, if we have the ability to approve or disapprove an appointment, we have that of all of those positions, then why do we only have it with the city manager and not the city clerk and not the city attorney?
Right, but that's item I again, that does extend that power for removal or suspension of city manager, city attorney, a city clerk without mayor approval. So H, because how I'm understanding this correctly, or if I'm understanding this correctly, H is contemplating a situation where a mayor is deciding that they want to terminate one of these three positions, and they have to come to the council for consent. And so in this scenario, the council could say, nope, we like the city attorney, even though you're not working well with them, we're going to say you have to keep them. For item I, that's where we get into the other piece where we do have removal power, and it expands it to city manager, city attorney, and city clerk. As I said, I have some questions on some thoughts about the number of votes that should be required for that. I think this should be a pretty high bar. I think you should be seeing a good amount of consensus within the governing body that this is what you want to do. But for this one, I really see where this would come into play is a mayor is trying to get rid of one of these positions. They're not working well with them. They're not helping them fulfill their agenda that they were elected by the entire city to move forward with. And the city council kind of coming in and saving this position, where then I'm not seeing as much functioning with in the executive role if we're going to have city managers and councilors. I know that in the past, and I can't speak to this as well. We don't have, some of our veterans, or even, some of our previous councilors, but there's been stories around, scenarios where city managers and mayors did not get along prior to our full-time mayor scenario, and how dysfunctional that was for the city. And so that is not a scenario I would like to get into again. Now, again, a mayor gets to fire them. They have to come back to the governing body or to the city council for approval of a new appointment. And so that's where that's ability to say, okay, fine, you want to get rid of this one, they're not working for you. But we want to make sure that you have somebody qualified in there. And so we have that capability, as well as the ability to fire somebody that the mayor has put in and that is not working well. So that's the difference I'm seeing between the scenarios of H and I. And that's why with this one, I don't think that leads to the city functioning very well. Whereas with I do see it as a really good check on or the ability for the city council to really look at these top three positions and see if they're actually serving the city well, and to say, you know what, they're not. We need somebody else. And so that's why I've come down split on these. Does that make sense?
It does make sense to me in one context. The context is the mayor gives direction to these positions, but these positions also work for the council. They don't have to just answer to the mayor. They also have to answer to the council. And so if they're answering to the council, then it makes sense that the council would have some control over, let's say there's 8 councilors and 1 mayor, right? Let's say what I'm looking at is, as councilors, we are very close to our districts. As mayor, you have to represent the whole city. You may not have an intimate relationship with each district. The council is actually more representative of the community than the mayor is, in the sense that we are intimately connected to our districts. And so if these positions answer to both the council and the mayor, then to me, the council actually has a closer relationship with the community, and therefore is more representative of the community than the mayor is. And if these three positions, which they do, answer to the council and the mayor, then you could have a mayor that came in and was a tyrant. And this city manager was amazing and doing good things because they answer to the council also. Then that gives this city manager or this city attorney or this city clerk the ability to operate autonomous from the mayor, because they know that the council, which is more representative of the people, is in play. And you can't have a tyrant mayor then dictating what happens to the city, because you have a council who's like, they may want to fire you, but we're keeping you. And I don't actually see this scenario playing out, but I do see that this is a place where as the council, we can say, we think this person's a good city manager, a good city clerk, a good city attorney. If the mayor doesn't like it, that's one person out of 9. Like, to me, the balance of power is we as counselors are more representative of the city. There's 2 of us per district. We talk to our community more comprehensively in deeper ways than the mayor talks to every district. And that's a function of how our system is set up. But if that's the case, and that is the reality of what we're dealing with, then the council should be able to say, no, you can't fire that person. And if that city manager, that city attorney, that city clerk wants to be like, I can't do this, this is too difficult to deal with a council and a mayor who are fighting, then they can go. The reality is there has to be a strike of balance. There is no balance right now where these 3 positions are concerned. There's sort of a balance with the city manager. And what I find fascinating is, like, we can say, let's do it with the city manager, but we can't say, let's do it with the city clerk, and we can't say, let's do it with the city attorney. I think all of us on the council have seen situations. I'm new, a year and a half, but I can assure you, I've seen situations where the city attorney has done things where I'm like, I'm not exactly in alignment with this. And so I think there needs to be a balance of power, because they're not cabinet positions for the mayor. These are positions that work for the council and they work for the mayor. And so if that's the case, then the balance of power is we have an equal opportunity. The mayor and the city council have an equal opportunity to dismiss or keep these positions. They work for both of us. But I do think we need to change that.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that argument. Again, there's a reason that we move forward with a full-time executive. The mayor does have more power, and in some ways we need to separate said powers. But also they are the executive. You know, that's the reality of the situation. They are the executive. And I know that we are different than the state. We're different than the federal government. Obviously we're different than other cities. And that is something to be taking a look at. And I do think that, again, I think the removal is different than the saving of a position that is then going to cause dysfunction in that executive office. That is the only full-time governing body member. The rest of us are part-time. I do think this is another reason why we have to build out counselor support. But this is just a scenario where I think that this is one of the powers afforded to the mayors. They get to appoint this team. They get to fire this team. Now they do have to deal with our, consent. And I do like the idea that we can remove somebody who is not good at their job, or is not serving the city well. But I think for this one, I do not like a scenario where a mayor is out of alignment with one of these 3 positions, especially a city manager. That is just not something that I think would benefit the city's functioning as a whole. Councilor Chavez, you had something to add to this too.
Thank you. I also want to, I haven't heard this at all, really, mentioned. Can we also focus on staff here? We have a huge issue with staffing in the city, huge issue. And my thing is, like, if we have effective leaders and we have staff in place and we have staff that are enjoying where they work and they're enjoying their leadership and they have direction and they're making gains and we're seeing it as a city, like that's a huge data point that we need to consider. We're talking a lot about what we want, what the mayor wants, what the people want. But what the people want is results. And if we have staff that is proving they could fulfill roles and they could do it successfully because we have a leadership in place that is helping them do so, that's a huge piece that I don't feel like we're discussing enough. And when we have leaders that are tied to positions that come and go based on those positions and a preference of one person, whether they have that quality impact on staff direction and accomplishments of those staff, to me, that's a huge problem. And I wish that was a bigger piece of our discussion, because how we make constituents happy is we have staff climate and culture that is positive. We have staff that want to stay. A lot of that is determined by leadership. It's a huge part of it, how things move, how our systems are ran successfully and efficiently, all of those things. And I think I just want to remind us to bring that very important group into this conversation when we're thinking about this, because turnover of leadership has huge detrimental impact on staff. And I think we see it. Like, we see that we have this turnover, we have vacancies, we have a lot of broken systems that aren't being addressed. And that impacts how our city is ran directly. Like, that impacts everyone directly. And so really, if I just want us to remind us to bring our staff, our team Santa Fe, into this discussion when examining these two things, because I just haven't heard it come up a lot.
Yeah, Councilor Chavez, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because some of the people that I have discussed these proposals with are individuals who did work for the city in staff positions, some in higher up positions, some not, not director level, but down at the manager place. And I'm not sure what level this individual is at, but who did work in a scenario where the city manager and the mayor were at odds, and it was not good for them. It was not good for the culture of the organization. It created this tension that did not make the city function well. I think that it is extremely important that you have good leadership. I think it is very important that you have good, organizational culture. And I think that a mayor who is at odds with the highest level, and there being this kind of war, and again, this when I think about this in terms of, like, I'm taking personalities out, but even if I really dislike a mayor, I hope that they're successful in making our city work well. And I don't think that they can be if the executive team is not one that they can work with. And, back to, if it's not going well, this is why I am in favor of the next one. Because there does need to be, that charge of the city council to say, we really need to make sure that things are functioning well in this organization. And that may mean removing some of these leaderships, but, to your point about the changes in leaderships are rough. Continuity is an important thing. The city of Santa Fe has not seen that in the city management position, and I don't know how long. But I do want any mayor to be working really well with these three positions. I think it is best for the city. And so that's why for this one, I don't feel comfortable. Now, again, the next one where we're talking about removal, that's a different scenario in my brain. But, we do have people that have lived through a mayor and a city manager at odds, and it was not pretty. We had people who actually wound up leaving. They liked the mayor. The city manager was going to fire them. This was, again, back before we had a strong mayor. And so they left because they, didn't want to be in this position anymore. So again, when I'm looking at the overall governance structure, I don't see this one as a positive way to balance the different powers. Whereas we'll get to I in a moment, and we'll have a different conversation then.
I just wanted to say one thing, just for the public that's watching. The fact that we're talking about people getting along in these leadership roles says we have a huge issue in root cause analysis, because data should be driving how we function as a city and not how people get along in leadership. This is something we have to start making, like the fact that that should not be what runs the city. What should be running the city is we have people in place in leadership roles that look at data and fulfill the needs based on that data. And where there's a lot of focus on personality, this is the concern I think that a lot of the public has around our city being driven by politics and not by need. And it's just something that historically exists in Santa Fe, and not just the city, but everywhere. It really is. Like, it's just a heavily political city. But here is a very evident, like, this whole discussion is very evident that we're missing a piece of system, because if we had solid systems, data, root cause analysis would be driving our decisions and our work, not how well personalities get together. And so I just want get along together. So I just want to, this is from my observation and something that's frustrating to me. And I think we all want that to be improved, but it's discouraging, the fact that our success has to be driven because leaders get along, when really leaders should be in leadership roles because they are wanting to focus on accomplishing goals that are dictated by the needs that they serve. And so I think that's something that we all have to examine after this discussion, because I think that's like a very obvious concern.
Well, I would say that it's not necessarily like they're best friends, but working well together. And I mean, I've worked in other organizations where I didn't do well because I didn't get along with my boss, quote unquote. We did not work well together. I think that, again, this does go back to how do we depoliticize these positions, but also we are different. We are a political entity. Somebody was elected through a political process. Now, this is where, the conversation around how government functions is very different. We are very different than an organization because, a director or CEO or whatever, they're hired by, who knows, depends. But for us, the people do elect a mayor, and what they are saying is, we've elected this person because we like the direction that they want to take this city. Governing body members may not. And the districts, have elected different people, and it's, we get a wide variety of individuals up here, but moving to that full-time mayor, that was part of the thought process, was that in the past, the city kind of swung back and forth on priorities, because as long as you could get 5 votes somewhere, you could swing. It is, and yeah, we are still, again, this is where there's some other pieces that I really think need to happen in terms of how do we start to decide priorities? How does this work go? We've only had one full-time mayor. We've only experienced this with one individual, and they, that means that we don't really have a very big sample size for what this actually looks like. But yeah, I think in the end, for me, I feel that I want to make sure that the mayor can work well with their executive team, because I think it's what's best for the city. Councilor Garcia, you've been wanting to jump in. I apologize to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it just comes down to having trust in the mayor if they want to make that decision, not only to hire, but to fire an individual. What I see here is a checks and balance where a mayor would have that check that they can't off the cuff fire somebody. Because then there would be that with the proposal in front of us, there would be that requirement for the mayor to justify why they want to get rid of a city manager. And I definitely understand the rationale where this is coming from, and this is why I am in support of this with the amendment if it's adopted. Because the scenarios of mayors and city managers not getting along, well, at the end of the day, if they're not getting along, then you need to see the root cause, because what I'm hearing now, or what I've heard, is all the blame has been cast on the mayor. Sometimes it's the city manager that's the problem. And so I think the mayor should have that authority to remove the individual, but the check comes in where if the city manager is actually doing a good job and being supported by the organization, then it's the mayor who gets put in check by having that request for termination be denied. And I think this should not only be extended to the city manager, extended to all of 3 of these appointed positions. And most importantly, I think the city attorney should fall into this bucket because it's a very important position that ultimately sets the framework for the governing body as legislators. That's the office that is the traffic control for legislation. And if the governing body's legislative agenda is not being met, then the governing body should have the authority to jump in. But we're focusing on city manager here. And so what I just surprised that, you know, in the examples given, well, it didn't work in the past. Well, there's always, you know, 3 sides to the story. You know, person 1, person B, and the person 1, person 2, the actual truth. And in the instance where whether the mayor's not acting in good faith, there's mechanisms right now to take action through the recall process. And right now, if there's, I would say we're halfway there. If the city manager's not doing their job, then there's process. But even with the process, as I mentioned in the last meeting, there hasn't even been the appetite to take action on the city manager when they violated their outlined duties. So I think it comes, we've got to look at the process in front of us holistically. And if this proposal allows for the governing body to put the mayor in check in the sense that the mayor can't just put that political pressure on the city manager to get only the mayor's agenda through and not potentially work on, I would say, the entire government's agenda. There needs to be that check if the city manager wants to fire the city manager. I mean, the mayor wants to fire that city manager. Because again, at the end of the day, the check is the mayor should be able to justify. And if mayor can't do that, that's why there's that check and balance where they say, sorry, mayor, you need to figure it out. And so with that, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Counselor Lee Garcia did request, and he is one of the sponsors, so I'm going to go to him and then to Counselor Castro.
Thank you, Chair. Great discussion. I haven't asked to chime in because I think that the continuity of your discussion has gone well. I do want to just make one point, and I think to Counselor Garcia's comments, you know, there are times when we also may have a city manager who is on contract. And let's just say, for example, the action of removal of termination of that city manager is going to be a pretty large detrimental, possibly payout. And so I think that the governing body should have a say in that. And that's another good reason why this specific item could come into play where the governing body would consent. And so I know that we haven't had in the last 2 appointments a specific contract with a city manager. But I think if we do, that would come into play, and it potentially could cost the city quite a bit of money or a termination. Keep that in mind.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Castro?
Just really quickly, I do want to flag one of the comments that came up in this discussion that we could potentially put somebody in a position where they feel that they would have to resign and not receive the same benefits that they would have if we were to dismiss them. And I just don't want that to be lost, that we could be putting somebody in a difficult position. And I see the floor, no further questions.
Thank you so much. Counselor Faulkner.
So just the last statement I'm going to make is we are focusing a lot on how the mayor is going to get along with the city manager. But what happens if the council does not? This is the point that we keep missing to me, like in this conversation. And I may not be hearing everybody correctly, but I would argue that both, if like the if the mayor doesn't get along with the city manager, that's detrimental. But if the city council doesn't, the majority of the council doesn't, that is equally detrimental. And like you could have a council, you could have a scenario where the mayor wants to get rid of the city manager, the city clerk, or the city attorney, but the council's working well with this team. And so then if you replace that person, the majority of the city's representation is not getting along with the new guy possibly, or girl. And so then the question becomes like, why are we focusing so much on the mayor's relationship with this? I know that they give direction, but we can give direction to the city manager. And so to me, I'm like, well, we're actually selling ourselves short as the city council by saying like what the mayor feels is more important than what we feel or how we want to negotiate. And the reality is they're equal and they should be equal. Like if a mayor isn't getting along with a city manager or a city attorney or a city clerk, and they want to replace them. Well, what if that person doesn't get along with the council? That is equally detrimental.
That's what I's for. Let me fire them. I mean,
But, like,
I think it's
do we
true. If
want-
it is equally detrimental.
But do we want to go through a process where then what happens is like the mayor wants to bring someone in, the council's like, we're not going to appoint whoever you bring in. So we'll be without a city manager indefinitely because we didn't like the decision you made. That is an equally possible scenario. I think like we really sell the council short in really emphasizing the mayor is the most important person that we have to focus on about how they're going to run the city, when in fact, we already can fire the city manager. We can direct the city manager. We can do these. We're just trying to say we can do that with the city clerk and the city attorney. And the reality is in the end game, I assure you, if you had a council who really liked a city manager and the mayor wanted to get rid of that city manager, the council could be like, go ahead and do it. We won't appoint your next appointment. This at least makes it transparent to the community that the council is saying, no, it's not going to be behind the scenes negotiating this kind of darker politics. We're going to be upfront about it. And we're going to say, we don't like your decision to fire these people. And would we rather have it done in dark rooms where we're like making these backroom deals and informal politicking? I feel like it's more transparent and better for the community that they see that the council can say formally and publicly and transparently, we don't like your decision, Mayor, and we're going to say no to it. The other way is all no transparency, no public, like the public can't see what we're doing. It's all going to be backroom deals. And that is what our constituents are sick of. That is what I am tired of. If we're going to say no to something, we should say it publicly and on the record. The way it is right now, it's all backroom deals. And that's the stuff that has to stop at the city.
I think that's a dangerous classification of it being backroom deals, because that's not always what happens. It's not like there's some like scheming always that's going on behind with these positions. So I think let's be cautious of that role. There could simply be that the mayor decides that that they're not working well with this individual, that they're not carrying out the policy that they want to fire them. Now, we have plenty of opportunities to say we don't like it. We get to, we get to communicate from the governing body. We get to consent to the next one. I think that there are plenty of opportunities to speak to what's going on. So I want to be very cautious because I think that sometimes we breed a conversation around conspiracy theories that aren't always there. So a variety of things happen. I don't think with everything we do, we can account for every single scenario.
I think the
but-
point was more to that the potential for informal negotiating is higher when you don't require transparency. I think that's what I was alluding to. I
Okay.
probably did a bad job at it. But the potential for not being transparent about what the council's will is higher when the council doesn't have the authority to do it publicly and vote on it and Like there's a power balance that we're not going to meet unless we have some checks and balances in place. And when you have an imbalance in power, the likelihood that non-transparent, informal negotiating happens is like 90% higher.
You do not actually have the statistics for that. Don't quote stats. You don't actually have. Okay. I think that we've beaten this horse. I think we understand what everybody's positions are. Counselor Garcia, did you want to move your amendment while we're Russian dolling our,
Yes,
Motions.
make a motion to move forward with amendment.
Second.
okay. Is there any discussions around the amendment at this time? We have a motion on the second, motion and a second on the floor. Can we please get a roll call?
Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. And then we have a motion and a second on the main motion as amended. May I please have a roll call?
Counselor Castro,
No.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Madam Chair,
No.
motion passes.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on to item I, which we've already kind of discussed. But this is consideration of resolution number 2025 to be numbered later. Again, sponsored by Counselor Pilar Faulkner, Counselor Amanda Chavez, Counselor Lee Garcia. It's a resolution proposing a ballot question to be submitted to the City of Santa Fe voters during the November 4th, 2025 regular local election regarding amending Articles 6, Section 6.02 and 7, Section 8.04 of the city's municipal charter to allow 5 counselors to suspend or remove the city manager, city attorney, and city clerk at a regularly scheduled meeting. We have Marcia Anarino, our Legislation and Policy Innovation Manager, here to be our staff. And again, I will go ahead and, do sponsors have more to say on this one? I mean, we've kind of talked about this a lot. No? Okay. Counselor Castro, you pulled this.
Sure. Yeah, I think we had a lot of discussion. I have some concerns and maybe a question for Ms. Iannarino. Currently, what is the process and how many counselors does it take for us to fire? I know we can definitely bring the city manager. Is there any process that we currently have to potentially fire the city clerk or city attorney?
Chair Kasich, Counselor Castro, to my knowledge, the governing body does not have the authority to remove a city clerk or a city attorney.
And what is the threshold to fire a city manager?
Just because I sometimes.
I believe it's a supermajority, but I think it currently says 6.
Yeah. Chair Kasich, Counselor Castro, let me just look because I get nervous talking in front of people. I think I know the answer, but I don't want to say the wrong thing.
And I'm notorious for asking questions that I think I know the answer to as well. So.
Okay. Remove. Okay, so Article 7 of the city charter, which is devoted to the city manager, states that for removal of the city manager may be suspended or removed by the mayor, just because the mayor decides to do that as their supervisor. Or letter B states by a vote of 6 counselors at a regular scheduled meeting. So that would be what I understand to be a supermajority.
And again, because I am in the midst of working on some efforts to balance that power between the mayor and the governing body, if we were to pass this piece of legislation as it reads currently, and then those voting members would change, or there would be at-large city councilors, for example, those numbers would be inaccurate and we would have to come back and change this once again, which is one of the reasons that I'm hesitant to make these changes before we have the full conversation, which Councilor Faulkner was alluding to. So thank you so much, and I cede the floor.
Sorry, eating popcorn. Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions, comments from the committee? Counselor Faulkner?
I would just offer that when we do this larger review, a lot of things are going to change, right? So, and we can change this as well when we make that decision. Like if the charter review group looks at this and is like, that wasn't the best approach to this. It was like a stopgap a little bit until we had the ability to like do a holistic look at this situation. Just because we passed it today doesn't mean it can't be changed when we do the full, when we do the review on the relationship between the council and the mayor. This is, just because we do it today doesn't mean it can't change. It can change. This is just a temporary fix until we can do a more comprehensive review of this, of the situation and of the relationship and the balance of power, because we didn't contemplate the council's balance of power and the checks and balances with the mayor. We only contemplated how to make a strong mayor. We did not contemplate how to balance that with the council. And again, I keep saying this, a government, a democracy is only as powerful as its checks and balances. And right now, we don't have the time to do a deep dive into this checks and balances issue between the council and the mayor. But we do have the time to put this small thing in place, and it can change. And I will likely support the change, because by then we would have had an opportunity to do a deeper dive into the situation. So I don't think we need to look at like, because we do this today, it's going to be the way it is forever. The law is a tool that legislators have to meet the needs of the community and the needs of the city or the state or the county or the federal government. It is not infallible. And what's fascinating to me is like, we're hesitant to make decisions as leaders because we're like, oh, once we do it, it's there forever. It is not there forever. It should change all the time. It should be flexible. It should be agile. You can do it in increments. You can say like, right now, this is what we're going to do, but we know it's not the silver bullet. We know that we need like 3 more opportunities to figure out what the sweet spot is, but at least we're in motion. At least we're doing something. Like the people are crying out constantly, do something. Our hesitance to make decisions because we're contemplating these like bigger, broader issues. We are not making decisions and nothing's happening. And I get from my constituents, not just mine in District 3, but from all over the city, just do something, start moving to make a difference for the city. And in my opinion, that's what these 2 pieces of legislation, they're not the perfect answer. We're going to have to adjust as we move along. And this dialogue, actually, I have to appreciate my fellow counselors, because this has been a very enlightening and like fun debate. For me, anyway. I feel like we're all intelligent people and we're going back and forth and trying to figure it out. But I do want to say, like, don't think because we do this today, if we do this today or at city council, that this is the end of the conversation. This is the beginning of the conversation. Part of why I wanted to sponsor these pieces of legislation was to say, let's start having a dialogue. Let's start moving pieces. Let's just start moving in a direction. Our hesitance to move is making our constituents so angry because we're not doing anything. We're debating, we're talking about what we could do, what we should do, but we're not taking action. And part of the reason that the other sponsors and I did this was to take a step forward in a direction that we felt would start a dialogue. And maybe part of it would pass, maybe some of it wouldn't. But if we didn't step forward and try, nothing would happen.
I would say that we've done things. I mean, we established a, ballot
So-
community. We changed some stuff. I know what you mean.
Point of
Speaking to the
clarification.
public's perspective.
So yeah, my hesitancy isn't actually in taking action. It's rather being very intentional with the action. And my suggestion in this particular case is changing language to simple majority, supermajority instead of numbers would actually allow us to move forward on things in the future and not be as prescriptive. So that was one suggestion, that we could just be a little bit more, have a little more forethought in what we plan to do in the future in changing some of those specific words. And I also concur with Councilor Cassett that it depends on the issue. Unfortunately, there are certain tracts of land that we want to donate that have been held back, and people feel that we're moving too quickly. And so it really is based on the issue. And in particular, charter amendments, I think we need to be very careful with. This is a big deal. Putting things in front of the voters for them to decide and really have to learn and digest is a big deal. We're not only putting something on the ballot, but then we are also having to communicate what that change is going to be and talk to our constituents about what those changes might look like for them. And so I just want to be very intentional with the work that we're doing. There's no hesitancy in actually doing work, but rather doing the work that we are intending to do. Thank you.
You. Counselor Travis, do you have anything this time?
No, thank
Um,
you.
So a couple things here, as alluded to, I am in favor of this one. I am curious why, so first of all, to clarify, right now, 6 counselors, not 6 members of the governing body, is it 6 counselors have to vote to remove a city manager?
Counselor Cassett, Chair Cassett. I just will check. Article 8.04 states 6 counselors.
Okay, interesting. Fascinating. And this would take it down to 5 and put these other ones in. Why did you guys, so why was the decision to go from a super to a simple majority, essentially, from 6 to 5?
I think that what we were contemplating is to approve the appointment is a simple majority. So then to fire someone, we were looking for continuity, right? And so in our mind, and I do like Counselor Castro's change to saying like not a number, but a simple majority versus a super majority. That's actually really smart. And I do like that, because the council can change. We can go down to 1 counselor per district. We could go to 3 like who knows what we can do when we're exploring this. So I do really think that's smart in that you say it's a simple majority. That way there's not a number, because the number of counselors can change. That I do agree with that. And I'm willing to co-sponsor an amendment that does that for when we hit finance committee. We were looking for like, why does it take 5, a simple majority, to appoint people, which I feel is also as powerful as terminating somebody. So then if it's a simple majority to approve an appointment, then it should be a simple majority to terminate.
And is that simple majority, that's a simple majority including the mayor, correct? So we still don't have continuity, right? Is that simple majority for appointment? Does that include the mayor's vote?
I think well, that's a question for staff.
So yes, it does.
I'm pretty sure it does.
Chair Cassett, counselors, yes. So under the powers and duties of the mayor, it specifies that that the mayor can appoint the city manager, city clerk, and city attorney with consent of the governing body.
Okay. And I guess that makes sense because that's 6 out of 9, so that's 2/3. So that still is, that would be a super majority of the governing body. Correct?
No,
Or
it's
no?
a
I
simple,
it
it's a
would be
simple.
5. I think it's a
majority.
simple.
Oh, 5. I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. I was saying 5
Right.
counselors plus mayor. Thank you. Okay, so that's a simple majority of the governing body. Okay, but it still does include the mayor. So only 4 counselors have to approve that plus a mayor.
Correct.
I actually think we should.
Point of clarification.
Yeah.
So if the amendment I'm proposing were to pass, the mayor would only vote if there was a tie.
But that still meant that a 5-4 could go. So it's still in essence, you still only for an appointment, because the mayor already is saying, I want this person, you only need 4 counselors. So even if that were to pass, it wouldn't change that factor that 4 counselors plus a mayor could
I
appoint.
think that's
So,
where it comes into, where I think where it gets, where it changes a little bit is like, what if 5 counselors wanted to terminate a city manager, city attorney, or city clerk?
Right.
You don't need the mayor
Right.
for that vote.
yeah, it makes sense. What I do prefer a supermajority. I'm in favor of this. I would prefer a supermajority of the council. So would that be 6 out of 8? I'm assuming math is not, has never been my forte, and especially when you're trying to get 2/3 of even numbers. And because, I mean, actually, Counselor Chavez brought up my logic about this, which is that changes in leadership are a pretty big deal. And so I would want to see that the majority of the, that, you know, a strong majority, a super majority of the council is really in favor of removing this leadership position. Now, it's getting a little bit different in my head because I was thinking 5 with a vote of 9, 5 versus a vote of 8 is, you're still getting,
That's a super.
you're still getting, well, it is still a simple, again, even numbers math. So things for me to consider and think about, and I will chew on this a little bit more between now and finance and have some discussions around the numbers. But again, you know, to the points in the earlier conversation, we really need to go into it again, but I do think that I am very much in favor of this one because I do think that if the council is saying the people in place are not doing their jobs, then I think that the council, you know, should be able to say, you know, these individuals are not serving us well. Again, the mayor then does have the opportunity to find, you know, somebody else that they feel is going to be able to work well with them. I do think now we have a very interesting conversation about appointment. So, you know, preview of future conversations to come in the next couple of years. But that is really all I have to say on this one. That is in addition to anything we previously discussed.
But again, I would offer that if it only takes 5 of the 5 members of the governing body to appoint, that is equally, it has the same weight as termination.
Yeah. I
Right?
think we should
So
change
then
that
if it
one.
takes 5, then it should take 5. If it takes 6, it should take 6. But keep in mind, again, this is meant to be like a temporary guardrail until we can wrap our heads around the bigger, broader issue of the balance between the council and the mayoral office. And all I can speak to is I have spent 25 years doing organizational development. And I can tell you that when you have unchecked power and an imbalance, it is the worst thing for an organization. And even if we don't exactly are like 100% comfortable with this at least is a starting point that starts the conversation. And then I fully intend to address, not kind of, 100% address this issue in a more impactful and more thoughtful way. But like right now, this is what we have. We don't have the time to, and this isn't a big lift. This is a pretty simple lift. There's continuity in saying we appoint by 5, we can fire by 5, right?
Except for we appoint by 4 and now but regardless,
You,
inconsistencies, but that's fine.
but what
We
I'm
found them.
saying is this isn't the 100% fix. This is like the 80% fix. And then when we dig into it deeper, and I know there's a will on the council. I know Councilor Cassett, Councilor Castro, Councilor Garcia, Michael Garcia, Lee Garcia, Chavez. There's a majority of us who want to address this issue in a more in-depth way and a more focused way. We can't do that right now, but we have the opportunity right now to do this small fix, temporary, that then we can use as like a platform to jump off and have like the more meaningful conversation. But right now, the way that the city is working, it's clearly not working. Like, I know we've had city managers that the council has been like, this is ridiculous what's happening right now. I know that, I know we've had conversations about it, and I feel like we need to be more transparent about it and say, like, we have not been happy as a council with some of the decisions that have been made about the city attorney, city clerk, and I'm not pointing to, I'm speaking like throughout the history of the city, not right now. But I do think we need to be honest with ourselves and say, like, we can't solve the big problem right now, but we can solve this smaller issue temporarily until we can solve the bigger problem.
You already have my vote on this one. Like, you don't have to convince me. I already told you I'm in favor of this one. I apologize. Councilor Garcia, Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just hope everybody had their ability to speak. I just wanted to maybe talk a little bit about the numbers, because I know that's a concern. And so if you look on, if it was a 5-member, as we currently sit, you know, the council would be maybe calling for a termination or suspension. The mayor may not, agree there. They have a vote. So then you still need 5 members of the governing body. So that makes it, I think, it more difficult when you do 6. And so if in fact that legislation comes forward that, the mayor does not have a vote, we're still looking at 5 out of the 8 that are on the governing body. So I think the number at 5 is better, easier to work with, because if you go per 6, it's almost impossible.
Well, that's actually why I think about this, because I think that it should be really, it should be, but I mean, again, I'll chew on this one, but in terms of it going to 6, like I feel that a super majority of the council then is saying that there is a really big issue. Now, again, 5 out of 8 is more than half. So something for me to think of, but I do think that it should be, where is the balance of it being challenging? Because I think it should be challenging. I don't think this should be something that, a couple, and we can't, but just a couple like rogue counselors on the council could be able to create some mayhem. But I do think that there needs to be a lot of consistency there, because it is, changes in leadership, they do have ramifications throughout the organization, as Councilor Chavez was bringing in. And how we balance these things is, to Councilor Faulkner's point, we've had a really interesting conversation tonight, and a lot to look at in the future.
Just a quick point of clarification. I know that we are all policy nerds and we get really in the weeds about this. My concern is really just with language that is a little more fluid and flexible rather than having specific numbers, so that we are able to sort of work with that in the future.
Any other questions or comments on this one? If not, can I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. May I please have a roll call?
Counselor Castro,
No.
Counselor Chavez,
Yes.
Counselor Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Faulkner,
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes, and I'd like to not quite explain, but clarify my vote. I'm still not sure about the numbers. So that is something that I do want to have some further discussions with, both the sponsors as well as, some other individuals. And I don't know if when you guys were doing this, if you happen to take a look at what other communities do, and what those thresholds look like. And so if you have, I'd be really interested in getting some of that information. Thank you.
Motion passes.
Oh, thank you. And then I explained, all right, we're done. We took care of that one. All right, moving on. Matters from staff, Director Hammond Paul, why don't you zoom on in and give us any matters that you may have this evening, if you're there. Or if the kids have tied you up, please let us know.
Here, and I'm going to apologize for not being in person. I am on super kid duty, and I'm not actually in a great location to be able to give an update. So I'll send a written update, if that's okay with you, Madam Chair.
Absolutely. Enjoy the kiddos.
One thing.
Oh, yes.
I just wanted to take a moment to wish Director Hammond Paul a happy birthday tomorrow.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Thank you, Marcella. Appreciate you bringing that to our attention. Happy birthday. Hope you have a really great day. Director Montoya.
Madam Chair and Councilors, I have a handful of interesting information to share. So IFAM, the International Folk Art Market, had a record post-pandemic attendance exceeding over 20,000 visitors, generating an overall revenue of $3.8 million. We have Spanish Market this weekend. I'm very excited to experience both the traditional and contemporary aspects of Spanish Market. The number of booths for artists is up from last year. Monday, July 28th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., the Office of Economic Development is hosting bilingual office hours at Del Norte Credit Union on Cerrillos Road to provide assistance and connections for local businesses and entrepreneurs. Starting Friday, August 1st, we are launching free public Wi-Fi at Swan Park. So that is super cool. Free public Wi-Fi launching August 1st, right before the Saturday, August 2nd, a back to school bash at Swan Park. The city is a co-host of this. It's a one-day event from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. There will be free food, sporting goods, and other giveaways. There's going to be activities like art and music and dance and writing and sports. So let's all come together, give our kids the tools and encouragement that they need to grow strong. On Monday, August 4th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., the City of Santa Fe's Office of Economic Development is going to be available to discuss the community's business needs and explore how they can help our community succeed at the Santa Fe Business Incubator. I have 2 calls for applications that I want to flag for you. The deadline for both is August 22nd. So the city's currently accepting applications for its Economic Development Advisory Committee. It's a volunteer group that supports entrepreneurs, advises on policy, and helps grow opportunity in Santa Fe. We encourage Santa Fe residents with business experience, entrepreneurial insight, or a passion for local economic development to apply. Letters of interest with a resume should be sent to Casey Dalbor. His email is cjdalbor@santafenm.gov by August 22nd. That's close of business August 22nd. The next application that I want to flag, the deadline is also August 22nd, and this is the UNM Center for Responsible Entrepreneurship is inviting entrepreneurs from all industries to apply for its intensive 8-month accelerator that will be hosted in Santa Fe at the Santa Fe Community College Higher Education Center. So this is really an amazing program. They're going to provide expert mentorship, hands-on workshops in Santa Fe. Participants will learn how to develop a solid business plan, a compelling investor pitch that's designed to help them achieve product market fit, early revenue, and investor readiness. So more information can be found about this program at the City of Santa Fe Office of Economic Development website. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you, and big props to Office of Economic Development. They're doing some amazing work, so thanks for highlighting it. Marcella, any other matters other than Director Hammond-Paul's birthday? Matters from the committee tonight. Councilor Castro, then Councilor Faulkner.
So just very quickly, safe travels to the Prince of Darkness, Ozzy Osbourne, who has passed.
I concur. Also, the back to school bash, thanks for the shout out. It's from 11 to 3. We have to thank some major sponsors who have helped us make this a free event for vendors, as well as a free event for community members. Sam's Clubs and Albertsons are doing all the food. Coca-Cola is doing all the beverages, and they've been amazing by providing huge banners that we can put throughout the city. The fire department has stepped up as usual and has helped us a lot. And Quorum is helping, Target is helping, and the Housing Trust, the Santa Fe Housing Trust is helping. So this event is really designed to put the kids through an obstacle course. And if they can, at every station, they're going to get prizes. But if they complete the obstacle course, they can join a raffle that happens every hour to give away a bike, a scooter, a musical instrument, art lessons. This is really designed to get kids off the grid and get them into some like healthy activities and to help them like find some spaces where they feel like they belong. Not everyone wants to be in sports. Some people want to be artists, and not everyone wants to be an artist. Some people want to be in music. So we're really hoping to do this comprehensive exposure to activities outside of the digital arena. And I just hope everyone come out. It's going to be super, super fun. Also, I just want to say to my fellow counselors tonight, awesome debate. Loved every minute of it. this is like why I wanted to become a city councilor. You are all super intelligent. And I think where there's conflict or disagreement, that is where we come up with the best policy.
Thank you for that, Counselor. I appreciate that. I think that that's a really, really important note. And also, I do want to recognize Counselor Faulkner, Counselor Chavez, and Counselor Lee Garcia for the Back to School Bash, because these are the brains behind it, the motivation, the inspiration. So you three have really shown such initiative and really gathering the community for some of these community events. So I know you give shout outs to everybody else, so I want to make sure that I give those shout outs to you. Other than that, we're on matters from the chair, apparently. Others from that, I have no other matters, except for that our next meeting will be Wednesday, August 6th, 2025. Thank you everybody so much for this important discussion.